everyone's Sundays are going great so far. Today we are going to be looking at Jonah 1:14 to Jonah 2:1. And my main focus is going to be that God is in control, even in what seems to be the worst of situations. He is still in control. I think that many of us have probably discovered, even me, that there are lots of things in this day that we can't count on. You can't count on money, you can't always count on your job, your health. Sometimes you can't even count on those you love, such as your friends or your family. But I'm here to tell you that there is one person that we can always count on, and that is God. You and I can count on God, we can trust in God, we can trust in Him to keep His word, and He is always in control, even in what may seem like the worst possible situation. Recently, I read a story. I don't know how many of you know Stephen Curtis Chapman. He's a singer, songwriter, and go ahead. In 2008, his daughter passed away. She was accidentally hit by one of her older brothers in the car. And for Stephen Curtis Chapman, it was a really hard time. And through everything I read, you know, he was having trouble just figuring out why God would let all this happen to him, why God would take his baby girl away. And in response to that, he's released this new album called Beauty Will Rise. And all of the songs on the album reference back to how he felt emotionally in this situation. And one of the songs, I want to read a few of the lyrics to, is actually called God is in Control. And it says, "This is not how it should be. This is not how it could be. This is how it is. And our God is in control. This is not how it will be when we finally will see. We'll see with our own eyes He was always in control. And we'll sing, holy, holy, holy is our God. And we will finally really understand what it means. So we'll sing, holy, holy, holy is our God while we're waiting for that day." The first lyrics, "This is not how it should be, this is not how it could be." He didn't want that for a situation. And I know when we're in certain situations that may be bad, we're thinking, this is not how it should be. This is not how it could be, but it's how it is. But God is still in control of that situation. So now if we can all open our Bibles and turn to Jonah 1:14. Starting at verse 14, it says, "Then they cried to the Lord, 'O Lord, please do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man. For you, O Lord, have done as you please.' Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to Him. But the Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was inside the fish 3 days and 3 nights. And then into chapter 2. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God." So my first point is looking at verses 14 through 16, and it is that God has power over man's heart. These fishermen are in this situation that they do not want to be into. You know, if you look before in the story, of which last week Kelsey spoke on, a storm had come after Jonah got onto the ship with these fishermen, and they had cast lots. The lots had fallen on Jonah, and so they decided they were going to throw Jonah overboard. Now these fishermen were crying out to the Lord. They did not want to throw him overboard, because if you think about it, that's like murder, because more than likely this guy that they're going to throw overboard is going to die. They didn't know that a fish was going to come and swallow him up. And so they're in this situation that they wish they aren't in. Now, if you look back at Jonah 1:5, it says, "All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God." Now when we refer back to verses 14 through 16, it says they were crying out to the Lord. Now we can assume that the Lord was Jonah's God, our God, not necessarily the gods that they were crying out to before. So even in a situation with these men who may not have had a faith in our God, God still had this feeling that He put into their heart. He still had a control over what they were thinking in this situation, and they knew that He was in control of the situation. They cried out to Him, asking Him to not let them die for taking this man's life. Then, after they threw Jonah in, the storm just stopped. so God was in control. I don't know what could be. They knew that God had a purpose for them throwing Jonah in. So even if the situation had not been where they wanted to be, they knew that God was in control. So if God had power over these man's hearts and these man's situations, don't you think that God can have power over your situation, my situation? My point 2 is that he has power over nature and animals. And we'll look more at verse 15 and verse 17. Verse 15 says, "Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm." God had control over the sea. As soon as they did what he needed to be done, he had the sea grow calm. Now, some of you may be thinking, if God is really in control of nature, or anything in general, then why does he let bad things happen? Why did he let what happened in Haiti happen? Why did he let Hurricane Katrina happen? Why did he even let the oil spill that happened in the Gulf happen? Why would he let bad things in nature happen as if he has control of nature? That could also go as far as saying, why in general does God let bad things happen? Why did he let Stephen Curtis Chapman's daughter die? Or things like that. And I'm here to say that when God gave man the freedom to choose, man made some bad decisions. Adam chose to disobey God, and as a result, sin and sickness entered the world. Now there may be some of you out there who may be objecting to that and say that that is not fair, that all of us have to suffer because of Adam's disobedience. But I want to remind all of you that even in our day, there are still those who choose to disobey God's word and to live in disobedience to his word. And sometimes as Christians, we may make the choice to disobey God. We make the choices, and then we reap the consequences of those choices. You can choose to make the wrong choices, but you're not free of the consequences of those choices. God is in control of the situation, even when you choose to do something that's the opposite of what he says, which is what Jonah did. Jonah chose not to go to Nineveh, but God was still in control of the situation even when Jonah went in the opposite direction. Then when we look at the fish, it says in Jonah 1:17, "But the Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was inside the fish 3 days and 3 nights." It says that the Lord provided a great fish. He sent that fish for the purpose of swallowing Jonah. It could be as simple as saying that maybe even that fish was created for that purpose. He was put in that place for that purpose to swallow Jonah. And as weird as it may be to think, maybe there's a person in your life that's your fish. Or maybe you're a fish in someone else's life. Maybe God puts you in the situation you're in for the purpose of saving someone else, or for the purpose of reaching someone else. I can think of a situation where I was struggling. I was having a rough time. I did not want to be where I was. I couldn't understand why God wanted me to go through this. After I got past all the problems with it, I was living with a new roommate, and she started struggling with the same things I had been. I had already gotten past everything, and so it made it easier for me to talk to her and help her through the problem. So maybe, even as something as simple as that, my problem and struggle was for the purpose of me to help my roommate later on. I was her fish that God put into her life to save her. So do you think that if God has control over nature and God has control over animals, that he can have control over your life and your situation? My last point is that God does have power over our lives, and he is in control of our lives in whatever situations we're in. Jonah 2:1 says, "From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God." So after Jonah was swallowed, he is in the belly of the whale. And I think figuratively, some of us, who knows, maybe right now you are in the belly of the whale. You're in a situation, it smells, it's dark, it's cold. You don't like being there. It's just not the situation you want to be in. You feel like you've hit rock bottom. God is still there with you in that situation. He is still in control of what is going on, and he has a purpose. I think that God had all of this planned out for Jonah. He knew Jonah would stray, but he had everything set up for Jonah so that Jonah would end up in the belly of the whale and realize that his place to be was in Nineveh. I think we need to plan ahead with eyes and hearts towards God. We make our plans, but God has the last words. How many of you have ever had God change your plans? How many of you did not marry the first person you thought you might marry? Or get the first job you thought you might get, or that you really wanted and you thought was your perfect job? Maybe it was because God had a better spouse or a better job waiting for you. Maybe you're with that spouse now. Or maybe you're in that new, better, perfect job now. And it was just waiting for you. It just wasn't the right time at the moment. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have goals, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't make our own plans just because God has it all figured out already. In fact, the Bible says we should be making plans, but that we should make our plans counting on God to direct us in the right direction. The more mature we become as believers, the more flexible we become, and the more open to change we become. Why? Because we realize how little we know and how much God is really in control of our situation in our life. When you hit the belly of the whale, like Jonah, will you choose to turn away and just wonder why God has you there? Or will you work with the situation because maybe God put you there for a reason? I think that we all hit times in our lives where we feel like we've hit rock bottom. We can get mad at God, and you can wonder why on earth He would want you to be going through what you're going through. Or you can remember this story of Jonah and remember how he had the whole situation under control. He knew each man that was in the fisherman's boat, and he knew that through Jonah they would experience God. He knew that the calming of the storm would also witness to the men. And he knew that Jonah would eventually be thrown into the ocean, so he had a fish prepared to save Jonah. He knew exactly what he was doing. And if God knew exactly what he was doing with Jonah, don't you think that he knows exactly what he is doing for you? He has a purpose for everything he does. And as Jeremiah 29:11 says, his plans for you are to prosper you, not to perish. You may think that God is not there with you. You may think that there is no way that God would want you to lose your job and not be able to provide for your family. And there's no way that you think that God would want to take your young child away before it was their time. But that is not true. He is complete control of each and every situation. I have one more song that I want to talk about that Stephen Curtis Chapman wrote. And this lyrics are to his song, Jesus Will Meet You There. And it says, when you think you've hit the bottom and the bottom gives way, and you fall into darkness no words can explain, and you don't know how you will make it out alive, Jesus will meet you there. When the doctor says, I'm sorry, we don't know what else to do, and you're looking at your family wondering how they'll make it through, whatever road this life takes you down, Jesus will meet you there. He knows the way to wherever you are. He knows the way to the depths of your heart. He knows the way because he's already been where you're going. Jesus will meet you there. When the jury says guilty and the prison doors close, when the one you love says nothing, just packs up and goes, when the sunlight comes and your world's still dark, Jesus will meet you there. When you failed again and all your second chances have been used, and the heavy weight of guilt and shame is crushing down on you, and all you have is one last cry for help, Jesus will meet you there. He knows the way to wherever you are. He knows the way to the depths of your heart. In every situation, Jesus is there with you. God is in control. He knows what you're going through, and he has a purpose for what you're going through. And I hope when you get in a situation where you feel like God isn't there with you, you remember the story of Jonah and how God was ultimately in control of that situation and had a purpose for it. Let's close in prayer. Dear Lord, I thank you for bringing us all here today. And I thank you that you are in control of our situations, that we know that you have a purpose for everything, and that you are there with us through each and everything. I pray that everyone here can realize this and that the rest of our days go smoothly, and I pray this all